if you're a portrait or wedding photographer, I'm gonna take you through what I call selling the shot. It's how you turn a static pose into an image that looks and feels authentic. Let's get into it. My name is Pi, and I'm one of the founders of Lynn and Jersa Photography and SLRLounge.com. We're teaming up with Adorama to bring you a new series of photography tutorials called Master Your Craft right here on Adorama TV. So let's dive in. Hello, my friends. My name is Pi. Welcome to Adorama TV. Let's get right into this. I'm going to take you to a recent wedding. Only we're not going to go behind the scenes. I'm actually going to walk you through the imagery. We're not going to do B-roll, just images in Lightroom and me talking to y'all because I want you guys to focus on the process, the steps as we go from A to Z. Let's start with just the lighting and setup. So I'm going to show you two images. This was actually shot, not long ago at the Vibiana. It's one of my favorite Los Angeles wedding and event venues. And we're shooting this sequence of images that you're about to see right in front of the main door. This is the main door in front of the venue. And I love that spot because it's this beautiful hallway where I can use these doors to basically control the natural light coming in. So I can use the doors, close them down if I want more of a strip box or leave them wide open. Here I basically have one door open, one closed. So I have a narrow strip of light that kind of comes through. Then I can shoot perpendicular and into this nice little background right here. I love the way the light just kind of comes in and spotlights my subjects. So this is the general setup. It's shot natural light. We can go over some of the settings real quick. This is on a Canon R5 and let me jump into loop view. Okay, and it's shot on a 35mm lens. I believe I stayed on that lens throughout this entire set. Yeah, so it's a 35mm Sigma at 1/320th of a second, f1.4 and ISO 1600. So with those settings, you know that it's kind of a dark working space. And I love the way that this natural light kind of emphasizes my subjects, letting them kind of pop out of this naturally darker background. The sequence of images I want to go through though, it starts actually right here. So now that you see the lighting setup, and by the way, I look for this kind of stuff everywhere. And believe me, every single venue has stuff like this. You can find it everywhere. Just look for doors and then basically shoot perpendicular to the light. That's it. Super simple, really easy. Now what we want to get to is basically these types of images. They're images that look and they feel authentic, but obviously we're posing. And this is the funny thing is that every single client, if you are a wedding, a portrait photographer, every client's going to come to you and say that they want natural and authentic images. But if you said just act natural in front of me, they're not going to know how. They want you to be able to direct them, to pose them, and to help them to achieve what that is because they're not comfortable in front of your camera. The question is, how do you do that? Well, I like to start with a pose. Now, we use a system called foundation posing. I'm not going to go into it too much. I'm just going to walk you through kind of the basics of where we begin and each of the different pieces of adjustments that are going through my head as we go. So with this first shot, 1/250th f1.4 ISO 1600, what I've done in this pose is I've placed his back to that door. Okay, so the door is just behind him to his back and he's facing the shadow side. And then I have her a little bit behind him. So if you were to look top down, he'd be slightly in front, she's a little bit behind, and she's looking towards the door. So her chest is kind of more towards the door, his back is towards the door, and we have one person in the light, one person in the shadow, staggered a bit. From this place, I'm shooting at that same angle that I was for this shot. This shot where we're shooting right into the background kind of framing and this little brighter area of sky and window behind them, right? But a couple things. The first thing that I notice is the pose is a little bit off. And this is what I mean by selling the shot. What we often do is we pose an image, but we don't actually look at the body language behind the shot. And the body language doesn't convince us that this is actually a real moment because something's off about it. As the photographer, it's your job to kind of know what that is. And it takes time to learn this process of body language. But as the viewer, they don't really know. They just look at it and go, something isn't quite right about that. They see an image and they go, oh, that feels as if it's posed because we haven't properly sold the shot, right? I've got them in this basic pose and I say, bring your hand up to his neck and kind of draw him in a little bit, even though they're kind of looking in different places. She's looking kind of towards his, towards his chest, and he's kind of looking down towards this side. Why does it look off though? Well, the first thing that I notice is the hand. You might be looking at the hand going, that doesn't feel for some reason like a gentle caress. In fact, the way that her fingers are sort of bent and the nails are kind of drawing into the face, it almost feels like she's about to claw him. So that's what's off right now so far in the body language, in addition to where her eyes are. Because if she were to bring the hand up to the face, she'd be likely looking towards the hand and towards the face, but right now she's looking in a different position and it doesn't feel like it's in a natural way. Okay, there's something else that I noticed too. And this is the first adjustment, by the way. So the first micro adjustment is, well, instead of like kind of bringing the fingers into the face, why don't you roll the wrist and go underneath the face to kind of pull them in? And immediately, notice that one little shift, we get a much better image. It's far more convincing. It looks a lot more soft and natural, right? The next thing that I'm doing is, because her eyes are blurry, right? Because she's blurry, not her eyes are blurry, but because she's blurry and in the background, I don't want her looking towards him because the eyes are open, and when the eyes are open and blurry in a shot, it doesn't look quite right. So I actually have her look down and towards the light side. And I also make a little bit of an adjustment. Notice that she kind of gets a little bit too much into his shadow, so I adjust her position a little bit. From here, I'm getting something much, much better, okay? He's looking down towards this side, she's looking down towards the side. Even though the pose kind of outside of the camera, it looks actually quite awkward. From my angle, it looks very natural, and it's starting to, well, we're starting to get the emotion and everything into it. But there's one other thing that I'm noticing now is that background window is not really helping me to frame her face. It's more so distracting a little bit because it's bright and it's drawing attention from her face. On top of that, because we don't have anything bright behind his side, behind the shadow of his face, it conceals too much of his face. We don't see the detail, and I want to see some of the profile in that. So we make another micro adjustment. This time, I'm just rotating them toward that door. So if you imagine the door's on our left side, right? All I'm doing is turning them a little bit. So she's kind of a little bit closer and more facing the door, and he's kind of turned away from a little bit as we go to this shot. Now I'm no longer shooting into that background window. I'm actually shooting into the wall right next to that door. Because of that, look at the adjustment now on the profile side of his face. Look at how we can now see the profile and see the silhouette as opposed to this last image, because now the background is actually brighter than the shadows of his face. On top of that, her face is no longer kind of in front of something that might be a little bit distracting. It's bright, it has a lot of shapes, so we get a much more clean looking image. Now it's about getting a couple other adjustments. We have angle, we've made pose adjustments, everything is looking good, but the way that he's looking doesn't quite feel right to me, because if she is kind of grabbing the face, if he were to look anywhere that's not like, say, her, he'd probably look down and towards the hand. Now, you're not going to turn all the way and look at the hand. That's going to feel awkward, right? But what you might do is kind of like glance towards it. You kind of look slightly towards that side. So I have him adjust his chin, looking slightly down towards the hand angle, and then it becomes much more natural and much more real. Give him a soft smile, and that looks great. And this is actually the first shot that we get that I'm like, I love this shot. It's actually a ring shot. So they're now positioned where the ring is drawing just a little bit of highlight. And by the way, this image is not worked on yet. This is just the raw file. I think I might have bumped exposure a little bit, but everything else is reset out. So I don't want you guys to look at it and see it's had a lot of work done to it yet. I'll talk about that at the end of the video. This is the first shot I love. It's kind of the shot where it's about the ring. The focus is on the ring. You can get a clear shot of his profile. And for her, she's kind of looking down and towards the detail side, making it really about him and about that ring. The next shot is very similar. All I did was shift my focus to her face, right? So same everything, just shift the focus to her face. I told him to smile softly, so that way we just get a light little smile as they kind of look down towards that side. We get a very nice and romantic feel. One of the other things that's really nice about this is not only does the light draw our attention to her because she's the brightest spot in the frame, but the eyes kind of lead down and toward each other. Her eyes go down to the hand comes up, wraps around back to his face and eyes, which go back down into her. So it keeps the viewer really tied into the center of the image because of all those different components, the light, but also the shapes and the eye lines that draw us through the image. Then we make a simple adjustment and I say, now I want you to look at him and kind of pull him in towards you as if you were to give him a kiss. And she begins to pull and make it completely real. Do you notice that? As soon as she brings that hand down, She has now sold the shot. And I love this whole sequence. I would keep all these. I actually marked all these as flagged images. And I love this last one too. Her face gets a little bit too much in the shadow, but that's okay. I think it's still beautiful. It's still like great expression, all of it. But notice how, I want you to take a look at this. Look at these two images where we started versus the actual shot, right? This looks like we're trying, we're making an attempt, but it feels posed and it feels off. It almost feels like we're clawing the face. It's not quite right in terms of body language. Then you look at the right side and it's like, they did it. They nailed it. Here's what we're doing. We're setting the pose, then we're dialing in the body language. And as we do that, we kind of make adjustments to composition and anything else that we need to, right? When we got the pose and the body language dialed in, then we cue the expression by directing them to do something. We need them at that point to kind of emote. I need them to be real in that moment. So whatever I need to say to them, whether it's pull them in for a kiss, whether it's whisper something sweet, whether it's, make kitty cat noises, whatever it might be, I need them to emote, and I need that emotion to then match the body language. If the body language is soft, like this turned underhand, pulling him in, this romantic shot, I want the image to also feel soft. I want the expression to be soft. I don't want it to be this like weird, like laugh. Like you wouldn't grab someone, pull them into you like that and do this intense laugh, right? That would feel kind of odd. So I want the expression to match the language. And when we do all that, we get a shot that is convincingly authentic. I mean, it is authentic, especially when you've placed them there, especially when you cue it with something genuine, with a bit of direction that gets them to be present and in that moment, to forget the cameras are there. Then you actually do get that authentic, genuine emotion in that image. And that's what we're aiming to capture. From an editing side, I think it would be nice just to quickly cover what I might do on the edit. Let's take this into post real fast. You'll notice that I did shoot these a bit on the dark side. If I reset this out, it's about 2 stops under. Honestly, I could say, I did that on purpose. It was my artistic choice. I did that. No, since I got the R5, I've gotten a little bit more lazy because there's a lot more leeway in these cameras than, especially on the Canon side, than there used to be. You Sony lovers and Nikon lovers have had this 4 or 5 stops of crazy dynamic range where you could pull things out. We haven't had that. So now I'm just enjoying life. You know what I mean? Making mistakes and just fixing it in post. I don't usually do that. I usually get it right in camera, but I screwed this one up. Okay, enough of that. Let's go ahead and just get a look kind of dialed in. What I would recommend for a scene like this is honestly, anything would work, but immediately for me, I kind of think of something more moody. If I go something like the mood pack, it's gonna give it a bit of warmth. And I know you guys might not be using visual flow presets. That's totally fine. I'm just giving you an example of like looks that I feel like would look really nice. This kind of bit of warmth. But what my mind goes to is a black and white. I really want to go to black and white. So you can just press V or dial in your own black and white. I'm just going to choose the black and white from the Visual Flow Mood Pack. And then what I would typically do if I've underexposed is I'm going to do this. I would go dial up the exposure, usually something kind of high. So I'm going to bring this up to like +2. Then I'm going to start bringing the highlights down a little bit. I'm going to bring the contrast down a little bit. And I'm going to start playing with the blacks and the shadows. So I'm going to bring the blacks and shadows up. And notice that what I would get a lot in this scene is a lot of the background that I don't necessarily want. And that's fine. What I want you guys to kind of clue into on this one is I'm looking really at the highlights of her face and not much else, because I'm going to show you a trick. So once I get that highlight about where I want it, like right here, okay, I'm going to reduce the clarity a little bit, bring the texture down a little bit. That looks really, really nice. What I'm gonna do, I have a preset saved for this. It's just a radial burn. But if you don't have a preset saved for it, make one and save it. But if you just press Shift M, it brings up your radial burn. And you're gonna select the radial tool, or a radial burn is a radial tool with a exposure burn. So place it over her face or his face, whomever you're photographing. In this case, it's her face. And what I'm gonna do is actually pull down the exposure dramatically. See, when I've placed her in the brightest area of the scene and I've worked the image so that, well, around them is darker objects and it's dynamic lighting like this, then what I've done is I've set myself up where I can actually burn and make this convincing, even though we're pulling the exposure down by, 1.5 to 2 stops. It looks natural and completely in the moment. Or it looks like it was naturally lit this way, essentially like this is what came out of, you know what I'm saying. I don't really know what I'm saying anymore, but you know what I'm saying. From here, this is where I would dial in the blacks and kind of get everything perfect and maybe even raise a little bit of that clarity. And I freaking love this. I mean, it looks gorgeous. And I want you guys just to compare. I know that now we're looking at a final image, but just look at these 2 images before and after, as far as like really convincing and selling the shot. And by the way, you might notice sometimes that Lightroom, it tends to get, like if you have a preset or if you're just using grain, it tends to overemphasize that grain sometimes because of the preview types that it's using. So if it's doing that, just click to actually zoom in and then zoom back out. Then it'll give you the actual, grain, the actual look of the image. But look at this. Look at this shot here. Completely looks and feels posed. And then look at this final. That kind of blows me away because it's just a series of these micro adjustments. It's just spending the time, not a ton, a minute or 2 to actually sell the shot. So remember, in summary, pose, get your body language right, make your adjustments to the scene and angle, lighting, whatever you might need. When you've got pose and body language dialed in, you're good compositionally. Then cue the action, direct an expression by giving them something authentic and genuine to think about in that moment. And that's it. Think about or do. Up to you. If y'all enjoyed, you know what to do. I would love it if you'd comment telling what you think. If you have questions, let me know. I do reply to your questions, comments as much as I can. I read all of them though. So you guys give me a lot of great ideas and I appreciate that. Also, it helps me out if you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel. That tells Adorama, tells YouTube that I'm doing a good job so I can make sure I keep my job and I get to see you guys back here, same time, same place next week. Meantime, if you guys want to follow me, you can find me at PyJersa and I'll see you all next time. Peace.